So if you're old enough to remember that someone somewhere once thought that candy cigarettes made a totally fine and an appropriate Halloween treat for little kids, then it's fair to say you're probably old enough to remember Ben Cooper Halloween costumes. These were the outfits that came in the window boxes featuring a plastic mask and a vinyl smock featuring a ton of different characters. The rubber band on the back of the mask would snap if you thought too hard, plus wearing one was like entering a sauna, but for your face. Seriously, Ben Cooper costumes were like the original survival challenge. How long can you trick or treat before passing out from the lack of oxygen? The masks were so bad, in fact, they had to print a picture of what you were supposed to be on the front of the smock just so that no one would confuse your strawberry shortcake costume with Rocky Dennis from that Cher movie. That being said, I freaking loved these things growing up, and being a huge collector of NECA action figures, I was super stoked when that company announced they were coming out with a whole line of trick-or-treating kids dressed up in these classic costumes. So what does a middle-aged man do when he buys the first 10 figures released in this line and has the next 4 on pre-order? He takes 2 weeks, builds a 3-foot by 4-foot Halloween-themed Dollhouse Diorama like an idiot, and he films it all. So this is how I did it.
So this whole project starts with a dollhouse. Have you ever been to Hobby Lobby, seen the dollhouses there, and thought to yourself, that'd be a fun little project? Does this look like a fun little project to you? Because it's not, but we'll talk more about that later. First thing I did was lightly sanded all the pieces before adding the first coat of spray paint. Then I took a sanding sponge and lightly sanded again, and then used a tacky cloth to wipe everything off before going in for coat 2 and coat 3. Next we glue, because nothing says quality craftsmanship like holding 2 flat pieces of wood together with a hope, a prayer, and some sticky white stuff. Seriously, with the exception of the crossbeam there, nothing is notched or tongue and grooved. You literally have to hold 2 planes perpendicular to each other, glue, and then tape. I used some Krylon Fusion granite spray paint for the foundation and porch posts to give it a nice stone look. Then I started attaching the porch floor to the foundation with glue, masking tape, and weights. That wood floor I temporarily taped gets pulled up and attached to the side walls of the house, and then more tape to keep everything in place. The wall edges get glued so I can continue to exhaust the local supply of masking tape here in Northwest Ohio. Here's the dormer looking super sturdy. The foundation gets glued and I attach the upper portion of the house. Yes, you even have to glue every single slat of the porch railing yourself and then paint that too. Then we'll glue that along with the porch posts. The start of the porch roof looking super structurally sound, along with the back roof. The front of the porch roof gets taped and glued, and then taped and glued again. It was here that I realized I'm an idiot and didn't paint the inside of the dormer, so I ran and bought some self-adhesive wallpaper instead, because why try to fix something when you can just waste more money? Once that's glued and attached, the dormer roof gets added and taped and taped and taped. Window frames, yep, you're building those too, Bob. These triangle accents, yes, 3 different pieces of wood glued together, but I saved you the misery of watching me build those by not filming it. I bought these adhesive asphalt shingles instead of dyeing and gluing 950 separate ones because, like we learned before, when faced with a challenge, avoid it by spending more money. I had these little puck lights from Walmart I used on a previous project that I attached as a porch light. And then I hopped over into Nomad Sculpt to make some pavers to use as retaining walls for the landscaping around the beds. Then 3D printed those out on the Bamboo X1C with a terracotta colored filament to avoid having to paint them. Next up was measuring and cutting the wood base everything was going to sit on. Ended up going with 4 feet wide by 3 feet deep. And this grass is some of the most realistic stuff I've ever seen, and I got it at Big Lots of all places. After spreading it out and flipping it over, I traced the outline of the base onto the back, and then I used metal snips to cut it out. Next up was gluing in the window frames on the front, and then the plexiglass and inside frames on the back. I used some leftover house paint we had for the door, glued in the plexiglass and around the frame, and then attached, then glued the inside door frame in place. For the sidewalk, I used these rubber pavers from Lowe's and cut out the rectangles as they were, but I went back later and I cut them down a little bit more narrow. Then I hit these with the granite spray paint to lighten them up a bit. I blocked out the sidewalk area and then cut it away, leaving the grass for the curbside. And then I recruited the wife to cut out the curtains for the windows using some sheer napkins from Walmart as I hopped back into Nomad to sculpt and print the curtain rods, which I then glued. Using a paint marker, I went ahead and traced the outline for the beds. And then I used the metal snips again to cut out the grass. Seriously, these things were so much easier than using scissors. Since everything was going to sit lower than the grass, I went ahead and took some paper and made stencils of the holes. Then I traced these out on a carpet square and cut them out to give the beds a sturdy, level, and flush surface to go on. With that done, I glued the grass and the carpet in place and positioned the house on the base, which surprisingly didn't fall apart. For lights, I ran a Phillips Hue strip inside, which allows me to change the colors and use effects like flickering candles, which is pretty cool. Then I started gluing and placing those 3D printed pavers that we made earlier. I wanted to use these mum-looking bushes around the whole house, but Michael's only had one set of 2, so I glued those in place. And then I added rocks I got at Michael's as well. Next up, it was time to glue the sidewalk. And I got this really cool light up tree from Michael's as well, but the leaves were just too big. They were messing with the scale, so I went ahead, I pulled all the leaves off the branches and then hot glued smaller leaves that I found at Hobby Lobby to replace what I removed. With the tree done, I could add the landscaping around it, and I went ahead and glued rocks to the top of the base so everything wouldn't go flying when I have to replace batteries. For the curbs, I used these cord management covers from Menards that I had laying around, cut them with the miter saw, then spray painted them with the granite, then I glued and attached them to the base. This dormer trim is something that I added separately because, yep, the trim they give you isn't even cut to the connecting angles. You have to do that yourself too. This is truly DIY. With the chimney attached and hay bales added, leaves were next, which smelled like ass. Seriously, I do not understand why these things smelled so bad. Leaf bag. I really wanted a ton of leaves, and I went ahead and threw some in a leaf pile too. A welcome mat for that nice suburban feel. And then jack-o'-lanterns for the porch. I got these bushes at Walmart to round out the beds, cut the stems, and then glued those in place. Weather vane from Hobby Lobby, drilled into the base and glued in place, along with a mailbox. I found these really cool metal clickers at the party place that I thought would make good wall decorations for the porch. So I went ahead and looped and glued some twine to the backs, and then attached those to the walls. I thought these little scarecrows from Hobby Lobby would make some good porch post decorations, and had to add a water hose because why not? I cut up these skull bracelets I bought with the metal clickers, drilled holes in the sides since the holes they had in them were in the top and the bottom, threaded some twine through, drilled some holes in the porch rafters so I could screw in some eye hooks. Then I went ahead and looped the twine through the hooks and ended up with some pretty cool skull garland. Hobby Lobby pumpkins. Hobby Lobby pumpkins. Hobby Lobby pumpkins. Hobby Lobby pumpkins. Big skeleton lit by these floodlights from Michael's. Then I went in with a box cutter to cut in cracks in the sidewalk just to give them a more weathered look. Keeping to scale, I folded up some sheets of toilet paper, then cut out thin strips of those that I used to teepee the tree on the side of the house. Small styrofoam balls, leftovers from the curtains, and Mod Podge. Folded the fabric in half and cut out a half circle, a 1-to-1 ratio of Mod Podge and water, soaked the fabric in the paste and then wrung it out, placed over a ball and added a nail and an alligator clip so that I could shape a cute little ghost. With the fabric dried and holding the ghost shape, I painted the eyes with FW ink. I added an eye hook and twine and then attached them to the tree. Oh yeah, adding the porch step now because I forgot to tell you, that was missing from the box originally, so I had to wait for the company to ship me one. And finally, adding all the Ben Cooper trick-or-treaters. Last thing I did was I sculpted some egg guts from white clay. I used yellow for the yolk, added some UV resin, cured it for a couple of minutes, added it to the sidewalk with some smashed in clay, and I attached a 3D printed egg to a thin wire to make it look like Frankie up here is doing some egg tossing. I added more 3D printed eggs to his bucket. And now it's time for the final reveal and the money shots.
All right, guys, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching my slow descent into madness. I appreciate it. If you want to see more midlife crisis videos like the one you witnessed today and some drawing tutorials as well, if you haven't yet, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you can get alerted when I post new videos. Also, before we go I want to know down in the comments, What was your favorite Halloween costume growing up? It doesn't necessarily have to be one of the Ben Coopers. Bonus points if it is, though. But I want to hear down in the comments. For me, my favorite Ben Cooper growing up was Gizmo from the Gremlins. And my overall favorite Halloween costume was a Don Post mask with a big t-shirt. It was the Tor Johnson bald head guy, just with a huge t-shirt. One of my all-time favorite masks. Absolutely love that one. So those are my two favorites. I want to hear what yours are, though. So that's it. I can be found online, BeeJayDeL.com, as well as on social media at BeeJayDeL. So until next time, keep creating.